Hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel discussion on industry-academia partnership. In this panel discussion, we will be discussing industry's role in encouraging entrepreneurship and the best ways to have synergistic partnership between academia and the industry. One of the most important assets the Indian business sector has today in terms of innovation is entrepreneurs, and basically the future that is in the colleges today, studying the most important technologies of our times. The industry has a necessary role to play in encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship in the country, especially at the academic level. Some of the best minds of our times were indeed once students who took the entrepreneurial plunge after the big companies saw merit in what they were doing, and they went on to create and follow their passion. Industry, by its very nature, focuses on addressing solutions that hold commercial value, while academia looks at building new innovation through research and development testing. These synergies offer a partnership between the two of them that can be astronomical and potentially path-breaking. And yet, there is also a dichotomy here, because the goals of what industry is looking to achieve and what academia is looking to achieve can often be seen as orthogonal to each other. And that therein lies the opportunity for us. To explore this collaboration in depth, we have a very interesting panel for you today. Let me introduce our panelists. Let me first start by introducing our first panelist, Professor Raghunathan Rengasamy, or Raghu. He is the Institute Chair Professor at the Department of Chemical Engineering at IIT Madras and a core member of the Robert Bosch Center for Data Science and AI. Raghu holds the position of Dean of Global Engagement at IIT Madras and has taught at colleges and universities across the globe, including Purdue, Clarkson, and Texas Tech University. Welcome, Raghu, to the panel. I'm also pleased to welcome Suchindra Kumar, who is a country director for Wizenoze, an edtech company that helps learners access the best educational information on the internet according to the curriculum, age, and reading level. Suchindra has worked with several consulting firms such as KPMG, Kayan India, and PwC over the last 15 years. Welcome, Suchindra, to the panel discussion. Next up, we have Darshan Doshi, Director for Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the Flame University, which is based out of Pune. Darshan has worked with over 100 plus founders in various roles at Reliance Jio Gen Next, Wadhwani Foundation, and Flame University, and is most passionate about early stage startups and investors. At Flame University, he's building a budding entrepreneurial ecosystem that nurtures and supports entrepreneurs of all kinds. He recently launched a one-year postgraduate program in entrepreneurship and innovation right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, which itself is a commendable feat. Welcome, Darshan, to the panel discussion.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Madan Padaki. He's the founder and CEO of OneBridge, a social tech enterprise that focuses on rural India. Founded in 2016, OneBridge ensures last mile service delivery by connecting rural consumers to urban and rural retailers through an assisted commerce platform. Madan is an entrepreneur and a change maker who believes that every youth has to be empowered to unleash their unlimited potential. Every such empowered youth is a mass entrepreneur. I found the term very fascinating, and I would like to really deep dive on that term with him. A job creator, and that every mass entrepreneur is actually a social change maker, making a positive difference to the communities around them. Prior to this, he was the co-founder of Game, which envisions a thriving environment for mass entrepreneurship in India, resulting in a large-scale job creation. Currently president of TiE Bangalore and a strategic advisor to UNICEF India, he built Merit Track, which was India's largest skills assessment company and pretty much pioneered the genre of online education and skill assessment back in 2000. Welcome, Madan, to the panel discussion.
Thank you, Tathagat.
And last but not the least, we have Dr. Amitabha Bandyopadhyay, or Amitabha. He leads the innovation at IIT Kanpur and has recently also been nominated to the National Startup Advisory Council. Amitabha conducted his doctoral research in the laboratory of Professor Umadas Maitra at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York. Upon receiving his PhD in 2002, he joined the laboratory of Professor Clifford Tabin at Harvard Medical School for his postdoc research. Dr. Bandyopadhyay joined the faculty of BSPE in December 2006. He's also the co-author of The Ventilator Project, a 90-day roller coaster to build a world-class ventilator during the height of COVID last year. I would certainly love to know more about the ventilator project there. Welcome, Amitabha, to the panel discussion.
Thank you for having me.
So with that, it's my pleasure to host all you gentlemen to this panel discussion. And before we get started, I want to make a note to the audience. There is a special incentive. There are some exciting lucky prizes for a few lucky tweets. So we would request that you please use this opportunity to tweet your key takeaways from the session and use the hashtag Converge at Walmart. That will help us make sure that we are able to curate them. Thank you. Now, with that brief context, let's get started there. I would like to ask the first question to all my fellow panelists, which is really, when we talk about industry role and when we talk about academia in encouraging entrepreneurship, what is really that role and why is it so important for us? Sometimes we think that it should be part of the curriculum. Sometimes we think it should be part of an applied discipline. Sometimes we think it should be part of the experiential learning, or sometimes we think that it should simply be something that cannot even be learned there. It is something that we are born with, for example. Now, I really want to set the stage. I want to really pick on the brains of our experts and really understand what should really be the role of industry and academia in encouraging entrepreneurship at all the levels there. And why is it so important for us in the context of India? So I would like to set the ball rolling in the same order at this point in time. Raghu, if you could go please first.
Sure. Thank you, TV. So I really think universities have a big part to play in students getting an entrepreneurial bent of mind, but I'm not very sure that it is a real curriculum format that is relevant. So running a couple of courses, I don't think is going to really be very useful. I think somehow it has to be threaded through the academic experience. So let me give you an idea of what we do at Madras. So there are multiple stages in which students can get this entrepreneurial experience. So we have a lab where students can come up with an idea and go out with a product. This is over and above the courses that they are doing. So they do it in the evening, they do it as groups and so on. So this is somewhere you have an outlet inside the campus where you can just go take an idea, come out with a product. Product is not a finished product, of course. It's at an academic level. You've shown proof of concept and so on. Then we have, let's say, a center. We call it GDC, where you can actually go with a cohort of people, and then your idea is really vetted for commercial possibility and so on. So we open this out to undergrad groups. We also have a faculty join as a mentor. We have postgraduates being part of that group and so on. Then that's the next level, right? Once you figure out, okay, there might be a product, there might be a market, then we also have pre-incubation help that our IIT Madras Research Park gives. So the point here is that if a university wants to take this seriously, it has to become an organic part of the lived experience, not as a couple of courses that you do. I think this is very, very important for universities to think about if they want to get the next generation of entrepreneurs.
I think that's a very good starting point, and I'm surely when I come to Darshan at a later point in time, I definitely want to pick his brains because he's doing exact opposite of that in terms of offering a course in entrepreneurship. So it will be really great to learn about what are his point of views. But one follow-up question, Raghu, on this one, which is you talked about what you are doing in terms of your institute and offering the opportunities to the student. What is your point of view in terms of collaboration or involvement of the industry in these initiatives on the campus? Do you see that these are they play an enabling role in the same thing, or do you think?
Absolutely. In every one of these things we have industry folks helping us, guiding us, mentoring the students, mentoring how these things should be run. So the idea I told you, C5, which is you come into a lab with an idea and go out with a product. A lot of the funding for that C5 center itself comes from industry folks, our alumni and so on. So they are very actively involved in a mentorship role in either in the C5 and GDC, for example, this Gopal Krishna Deshpande Center, that again has industry folks vetting the ideas and so on. So again, the industry involvement is not something, it's not a one touch point. Again, that has to be threaded through the whole experience. And that's how I think we should view how to incorporate industry experience and expertise in this.
Sure, Raghu. We'll come back to you. I would like to go next to Suchindra and ask the same question to him. And especially also would love to understand his context, because he has been very active in the space of education, especially in the private universities as well, and K-12 as well. So what is your unique perspective, Suchindra, on the same question in terms of the role of industry and academia in promoting entrepreneurship?
I think I would just want to, build a little bit on top of what Raghu mentioned. So without getting into whether we need a course, whether it could be taught or not, what the academia could definitely teach or instill into a learner is the entire concept of inquiry, the entire concept of changing the status quo. I think that is the most important thing for any sort of innovation, or that innovation could be for working as an employee in the industry, or that could be as an innovator and entrepreneur, right? So instead of just telling students in terms of what the theory is, I guess the students need to be enabled to understand what could be done differently in everything that we do today. So whether it is about serving meals in the cafeteria, or just running your classes, or any of these things, how can we do things differently? How can we do them better? Or maybe do a complete overhaul. Essentially challenge and critique the status quo. If you are able to deliver that, the academia is really doing its job well, both from an entrepreneurial innovation perspective as well as making good employees. Because when you talk about industry academia setup, it's not just about innovation. It's also about ensuring that the existing industry is getting the right set of manpower for what they do. Innovation doesn't have to be only in terms of coming from a completely new setup. An existing setup could also gain a lot. And I think that's the key. We work with a lot of universities, both Indian and international, in terms of setting up industry cells, in terms of thinking of how can they do things with the industry. I guess, again, the part that I mentioned about bringing in that sense of inquiry, you need a very strong industry interface for the student to essentially test some of those ideas or test some of those theories. So, summer internships in a lot of cases just happen for the heck of it. I know some of the best iBanks where the summer interns are nothing better than glorified photocopiers. With no offense to anybody, there are other places where summer interns come in, they keep sitting in a room, do nothing. Now, the important thing is, if people don't try out new things at where they get an exposure, it will be very difficult bringing any sort of change attitude in those guys, and they'll just be takers for life. That is one area that at least we always try to work differently, and that's where global universities matter a lot. I could probably speak about a couple of universities in India which have done this well, but I would really want to talk about, for example, the Negev University of the Desert in Israel. It's actually in the desert. The name says Negev University of the Desert. What they've done is, in that place, which is almost 100 kilometers away from the closest city, Tel Aviv, they've got an industry complex set up on the university. The university gave out free leases. So they got a lot of startups to come in, a lot of tech startups to come in, set up their shop on the university by offering them multitude of things. All they asked for in return was that their students should get access to the work which is happening there. Today, the Israeli University of the Negev in the last 20 years, this happened around 20 years back. So today, pretty much the entire city of Negev, half of it, is now taken over by the university because this industry park has just grown physically. You've got so many industries coming in there because you've got a complete ecosystem of innovation between academia and industry. One simple step of getting this done. In India, IIIT Hyderabad, for example, has done excellent job when it comes to it. Again, they have a on-campus center which they lease out. IIT Chennai did very well with the RTBI. So it's not rocket science. I think what it takes is to ensure that we are not doing it just for creating a tick on the paper, but doing it with full earnest.
So I'm actually tempted to ask one question to you, Suchindra, given the fact that you have been involved in the K-12 education as well. A lot of times, one of the common criticisms we hear is that because of the way we bring up our children, because of the nature of compliance and hierarchy, sometimes in the whole curiosity or the inquiry gene, so to say, is actually nipped in the bud right in the childhood stages itself. And by the time we come to the higher education, the quest for really learning something new is diminished there. Do you think that's a well-founded point of view, or do you think that's an exaggerated, overblown, and outdated mental model?
No, I won't say it's an outdated model, but it's not completely true again. We are a huge country. You have different sets of people. In fact, we'll be surprised. We all come from a very urban setting. Our definition of entrepreneurship is very different. You will be very surprised if you go to a local vegetable market. A lot of these kids are actually going to school in the morning and coming back and helping their parents in the evening. Right? That's essentially the most basic form of entrepreneurship. They actually instilling entrepreneurship among those kids. How do you negotiate? We are talking about putting in negotiation skills as, we teach them in business schools. These 10-year-old kids do it on a vegetable shop, right? So it's a very different world. And you're right. There are people, in a very organized system where the entire concept of inquiry goes for a toss. On the other hand, this is enabled by the parents themselves in many cases and the ecosystem itself.
Oh, that's a very interesting perspective that, and I find it very interesting and relevant that they are actually learning entrepreneurship of the school of hard knocks. That is the real world, and not only the glorified version of what we tend to believe is really the Silicon Valley or the high-tech version of that. With that, I want to come to our next panelist, Darshan, and really ask him, because he's coming from the education. He has himself obviously been an entrepreneur, and he has also interacted a lot with entrepreneurs. But in the context of the academia's contribution to offering a program like what he is doing, what is your point of view, Darshan, especially the fact when Raghu talked about the whole aspect of experiential learning, or when Suchindra talked about the fact that there are a lot of realities school, which actually teaches a lot of things. What is your take on this, Darshan?
Sure. So I'm going to take a few minutes and build on what Raghu and Suchindra have said as well. I'm going to try to bring in a couple of viewpoints. When I came back to Pune after Reliance Jio Gen Next, the promoter of Flame University, I asked a simple question. When you want to build a center for entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial ecosystem at Flame University, what is the one outcome that you need, right? And he said, the job of an entrepreneur is to execute. Right. And so that is the focus of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is synonymous to building execution skills. Right. Now you have entrepreneurial mindset and skill set. I think the corporates today are very, very inclined towards getting people who have an entrepreneurial mindset. What is entrepreneurial mindset? The ability to, again, think and do and take the initiative. So be like a starter. Right. I like Basecamp as a company a lot because, that is the concept where it's written, which says, we are starters, not entrepreneurs, but rather starters. It may scale, it may not scale. It may be a lifestyle business, or it might be $1 billion valuation business. Right. What is common in this is you have to start, you have to fail, you have to iterate. Hopefully you don't fail too often and you are able to succeed and build on it, right? So it is about a habit, right? You have to get in the habit of putting yourself out there, being authentic, right? Right now we are seeing a lot of creator economy. Creator economy is nothing but allowing people to do what they want to do and kind of stepping outside their what would be a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 6 job, which kind of fixated them with a certain role. This is your job description, right? We are kind of taking it out and we are saying, okay, what else can you do, right? Because there is a potential, there are those many opportunities today because of technology and the problems that we have. So that's point number one. Taking a step back, right? What is it that we are trying to do at Flame University? I said, look, I had to leave Pune 10 years ago. When I gave up my family business, which was in fertilizers and engineering, I ran that for about 3-4 years, had a lot of fun, did a lot of things, right? I'm a chemical engineer by background, but I didn't want to do that business anymore. So I had to leave Pune, go to Boston at Babson College. Now, Babson College is #1 in entrepreneurship. Boston as a location has over 1,000 schools in the greater Boston area. And it changed my life. Okay. Within the third month, I was pitching to Mark Cuban and David John at Shark Tank. Opportunity, right? I was very hungry, and here there was a buffet. So I was eating like there was no tomorrow, right? And then I kind of, after a few years, I realized, well, why did I have to leave Pune? Why couldn't Pune offer this to me? Why couldn't India offer this to me? And I know you want to talk about, the Indian universities, higher education, and US or European universities. So I want to also use this as a way where I can just start that conversation now. But what I'm trying to do at Flame University, and all credit to the university for allowing me and giving me the autonomy to do this, is to create a 1-year postgraduate program in entrepreneurship. It's not a diploma, it's not a degree, it's a certificate program, which helps you give 3 answers to 3 questions only. Am I still interested to run this business after 1 year where they either have an idea or they are growing their existing business, right? So do I still want to do this? Because, maybe the dating period is done after a year. And so am I still interested in this or not? Second, am I the right person to build this business? Is there a founder business fit, right? Founder market fit. And lastly, what will it take to grow this business over the next 24 months? Can I have some clarity on the roadmap? So that is what this 1-year program does. So we are like a scaffolding, when a building is going up, the scaffolding is kind of the one which kind of holds things together, but also gives some sort of direction. So what we are saying is we are providing the scaffolding through the Center for Entrepreneurship, through our incubator program, our accelerator program, our PGPEI program. Focus is you with your goals as an entrepreneur to grow your business. You may succeed, you may fail. We are in your corner. We are someone who you can count on, right? Now, entrepreneurship is the ultimate game, right? You have so many variables, and all these variables are dynamic in motion. And so, it's almost an art. And what Y Combinator did about 15 years ago was to convert this art into science to create probably the world's first startup accelerator program. Incubators have been around in education institutes for a lot longer, but this was the first way by which it kind of came mainstream, right? Today, India has over 440 incubators and accelerators. Out of those 440, about 110 are corporate accelerators. India is maturing. We have 90,000 startups, out of which 20,000 odd tech startups, and just $11 billion of venture capital was put in only in this last 7 months. So money is not the issue. Mentorship, guidance is almost not an issue. But what is missing then, right? What is missing really is giving the scaffolding and some sort of structure to fail or succeed, right? I think it would be wrong of us to say that every entrepreneur who kind of goes through has to succeed. I know so many people who went through my Wadhwani Foundation or the GeoGenX Accelerator program. And by 6 months after the program, they kind of dropped a mail saying, thanks a lot, because of your help, we are actually shutting down this startup. You've helped us save 2 years of our life. Now, is that success, or is only making money and raising valuation success? Important thing to think about, right? And just rewire our brains a little bit. Since we are talking about industry and corporate part, so at Flame University, what we are saying is, there's an African proverb, which I heard, which is, it takes a village to raise a child. And so I kind of think, in my experience, you need an entrepreneurial village to raise successful startups. That's actually our tagline that we came up with. And so what do you need, right? You need domain experts. You need founders who are 2 years ahead of you, right? So if you're an idea stage or product ready stage, you want to talk to those who have raised seed funding. Those who are at seed funding want to talk to Series A or pre-Series A guys. Now the valuation and these rounds might be different, but what I'm trying to say is you want to talk to people and get guidance from people, ideally in the same domain, who are exactly 2 years ahead of you. So can we build a group of, people, so that we as an incubator, accelerator, entrepreneurship academy, industry, corporate accelerator can make these introductions?
No, sure, Darshan. I think it makes a lot of sense. And when we come to a little later down in the panel discussion, I also want to have a discussion on what would be some of those enablers and what would be the way for us to really bring all the stakeholders and players together to do that. So, I would keep going ahead in the panel, and I want to go to Madan and really pick his brains on. So we saw 2 or 3 perspectives. Raghu's perspective was really that maybe these are technologists and they are coming and we are helping them really take their idea from the germ of an idea and see how they can grow. And Darshan, you brought the perspective. It's a very skill-based way. So you said execution is a muscle and then it can be trained. I want to really pick Madan's brains to really understand how does the role of skill and especially his recent work with the mass entrepreneurship really fit into the overall sort of a jigsaw puzzle here. Madan.
Sure, Tathagat. Let me take a macro view and then zoom in. Yeah. And I want to share a story, a very interesting experiment that I did a year or so ago. We all know the demographic dividend that India has, right? And we have easily about 120, 150 million youth who will enter the workforce in the next 8-10 years. We have it going till 2031 or 32 or whatever. Now, it's also a known fact that out of the 500 million odd people who are in the labor force in the country today, less than 10% of them are employed by the formal sector. So even if you assume that, hey, we're going to grow faster, formalization of the economy will take maybe 15, 20% of this 120, 150 million youth will get absorbed into formal jobs. And that's the aspiration, right? So what happens to the remaining? So if you take even 120 million, that's another 25 million people who might get into the formal economy. What happens to the remaining 95 to 100 million youth? And that's a huge demographic dividend to gain benefit from, right? So our framing at GAME, at the Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, in my head is that unless and until you can instill entrepreneurial mindsets and create opportunities for 10 to 15 million of those youth who can build local businesses and create 5-10 jobs each, you are not going to solve this problem. This is probably one of the bullets that we need to take. Right. So that's where I believe the concept of mass entrepreneurship, that it's just not innovation. It's just not the entrepreneurship that we have so gotten used to, the romantic versions of entrepreneurs in the urban cities and the metros. I completely agree to what Suchindra was saying, right? That there is an upsurge of entrepreneurs that is required at the grassroots. You know, how can somebody run a successful grocery business, employ 5-10 people? How can somebody run a dhaba? And can that generate incomes for 20 others, right? So I think that is the switch that we need to do at all echelons of the society to say we need an entrepreneurial mindset. And I would argue that entrepreneurial mindset is probably the most critical 21st century skill that is required. All right. Does everybody need to have an entrepreneurial mindset? Yes. Does everybody need to be an entrepreneur? Probably no. Right. And I'm differentiating from that. So just to share a quick, interesting experiment that I did, and it was, there was a university in Tumkur, outskirts of Bangalore, that called me to organize a 3-hour or a 5-hour workshop on entrepreneurship. And I said, nothing can be taught in a class for an hour a day for the next 2 weeks. And they agreed. So the first hour was very interesting. So we just said, who do you think are the entrepreneurs? And the usual names came out, right? From the Narayan Murthis of the world to Elon Musk and, the usual suspects. And in 20 minutes flat, they had listed down all the other traits that they saw in these entrepreneurs: hardworking, dedication, innovation, ideation, execution, etc., etc. So they knew it, right? The third thing that I did in another 20-minute segment was if you're sitting next to an entrepreneur and you were to interview that person, how can you sense whether this person has an entrepreneurial mindset or not? We did a few role plays and they got it saying that we can ask these kind of questions. The second phase of the experiment was I asked them to go around their colleges, maybe 5-10 kilometer radius, probably into the hinterlands, and interview 5 entrepreneurs or businesses that are not more than 20 people, and come back with a recommendation of who their favorite person is. So about 100 teams went out and they interviewed grocery store fellows, construction equipment guys, contractors, etc. And they came out with their recommendations. And the third angle was to ask them to go back to those entrepreneurs and put a plan, given that you're all engineering and MBA students. Can you, if you have interviewed a dhaba fellow, how can you grow his revenue 3x? And, we had a few civil guys who did a very interesting study where they went, sat on the highway for this dhaba fellow, looked at the traffic patterns, where were trucks stopping, where were they taking a turn. They said, your board is 2 kilometers away, we need to put it here. So they actually did a very scientific analysis of the business and footfall into the dhaba. And they came back with a plan with a minimal investment of 60 or 70,000 rupees where this guy can triple his business in a year. Interesting part was we actually called the entire college for the presentations. We called these business owners and said, these guys will present how your business will grow. The fascinating thing was there were 2 girls who went to a grocery store. First of all, they were shocked that this grocery store fellow was making 40,000 rupees a month. And these girls said, I'm struggling to earn 8,000 rupees job. Why can't I go set up a grocery store in my hometown? The second understanding of technology was that these girls said, listen, by just putting a simple CRM software, by enabling SMSs to go to customers, deals of the day, we can actually grow the business to 1 lakh. Right? So the students' perspective of entrepreneurship changed. Now they will look at the grocery store fellow as an entrepreneur, the dhaba guy as an entrepreneur. They're not just looking at them as some other businesses. And in their minds, being an entrepreneur is not now so difficult. Right? So from this, my takeaways are the following, to come back to your question, Tathagat. One is that there is a world of entrepreneurship right outside the boundary walls of our colleges. Right? And we can call that as the industry or whatever. How do we open up the walls of our colleges to bring all of them in? How do we create immersive experiences for our young people to go out and interact and learn from the real world that's happening out there? And as colleges, how can you push the boundaries for these students to say, how can you reimagine these businesses for the future? And what can you bring that can add value to everybody? And from the experiment in Tumkur, it doesn't look that hard. It just requires the mindset and the whole aspect of building an inclusive ecosystem that can lift everybody.
I think that's a very, very profound example, Madan, that you gave. And actually, I'm tempted to ask you because the point that you raise is kind of with the kind of staggering numbers that you talked about, that if less than 10% are in the formal sector, and out of those 150 million demographic dividend, we are talking of 90%, that's almost 130 million. There is no way academia or university, even if together, can really address this, because this is a human scale opportunity for us. What role do you see for edutech entrepreneurs, or do you think there is some other player who has a role to play? Because this cannot be done in the physical classrooms. This cannot happen in one center of excellence alone.
Exactly.
What is your learning from the Tumkur experience to really scale it up across India?
So there is, as we speak, a fascinating experiment happening in the schools of Delhi, Tathagat. You asked a question, what can schools do and how do we inculcate entrepreneurial mindsets? The government of Delhi has instituted something called as the entrepreneurial mindsets curriculum, which is the first period of every day for classes between 6th to 12th. It's a fascinating combination of private sector entrepreneurs and the government working together to create an entrepreneurial mindsets class, which happens outside the class. Interestingly, there's 1,000 rupee loan that is given to every student. They have to build a business, they have to earn profits and give the money back to the government. As I tracked the last phase of the project, 92% of the students were successful in returning the money, and they had earned a profit. And they could go out and make juices, they could sell pakoras, they could do art and sell it on the streets or whatever. It's been a fascinating experience. And entrepreneurs now are taking and sharing their perspectives, right? So I believe that every student or every youth has to go through 4 phases to become a successful entrepreneur. One is the inspires phase, right? Who do you draw your inspiration from? And I come from Bangalore. And as a part of TiE Bangalore, I was fortunate to be exposed to and interacting with several entrepreneurs that I drew inspiration from. Hey, if this joker can do it, why can't I do it? Right? So it is demystifying this whole process. The second is aspiration. Right? What do I aspire to be? And that's where your passion, interest, skills, everything comes into play. And then academia plays a role in exposing that student to a variety of things, which will then help discover what their passion is. The third is you need to aspire to what Darshan was saying. You need to get started. You can't generally sit and say, I have 100 business plans, but nothing has hit the road, right? So how do you start breathing as an entrepreneur? And the last part of it is a perspire, that as you begin the journey, you will find hardships. How can the ecosystem support you during that perspiring space so that you don't give up? So if we can think of these phases and then structure that as an ecosystem, as a community, what is the role that each of us can play in these 4 phases? Then we can create an upsurge of entrepreneurship.
Great. No, thanks, Madan. And I think it's so interesting to see the experiment that you're talking about in the schools in Delhi, that I think it seems like a great experiment in the making. And if only we are able to build a playbook out of it and we can scale it across the nation, I think it will set the foundation at the formative years, so that when we get to the higher education, we already have the best minds which are in the inquisitiveness mode, rather than in the assimilation and a rote learning mode. And then we know what happens to the rote learning challenges. Yeah. So with that, I want to come to Amitabha and pick his brains on really understanding, because he leads the innovation and incubation at IIT Kanpur. So I wanted to understand, Amitabha, what is your experience has been in terms of leading the incubation charter, and what do you think are some of the directions that, for example, the National Startup Advisory and other bodies that you are part of are looking at?
First, let me share with you my experience of working with the startups. So, like at an IIT, we are fortunate to interact with a lot of very smart kids. There is no two way about it. Now, the problem with these kids is that they think that because they can do something well, which is maybe coding or maybe making a robot or whatever, they think that just because they can do that, there must be a business for it. So they are completely oblivious to the fact that for any business, there has to be a customer. And that customer discovery is generally, it happens through life experience. Now, what is the life experience of our students today? That from class 8 onward, they are perhaps studying 16 hours a day. And then they come to the IITs, where we have beautiful walled campus, completely insulated from Madan's the world outside of the campus. And nowadays, the fashion also is not to read newspapers or anything like that. Therefore, they have absolutely no clue about what the real world needs. Therefore, their products do not address the real world problems. And it is, I should not blame it on them only. It is us as well. I noted that Raghu is also occupying a chair position, which is most likely funded by Bosch. I occupy a chair position, which is funded by Kent. And if you ask me what is the business challenge that Kent is having, or the industry challenge that Kent is having, I will have the foggiest clue about it. Now, because we have also had the same kind of career path. So like a blind showing the way to blind. And I will give you an example. See, every one of us in this room, we are familiar about temples. We go there offer prayers, flowers, and then you come back. And we know, many of us know that those flowers are thrown away the next day. It is only someone with an entrepreneurial mindset thought that this flower can be used and recycled and products can be made out of it. All of us knew this as a fact, but we did not have the faculty to analyze it, that this can be a business opportunity. So that is something that I have noticed, but things are changing. Government is also paying attention to this. This is actually more of an India problem, that this concept of academic institutions being ivory towers is something that a lot of people take pride in. Perhaps, there was a time when it was important, but I really feel that we need to break down those walls. It has to be more two-way diffusion. That is very, very important. But, the government is now thinking that now a new faculty can be hired in a manner that, say, there is a candidate A. That candidate A can independently interview at a company X and at an IIT Y. The proposition is that if A is selected both at X and at Y, he can have a joint appointment at the company and at the IIT, and he will be spending his vacation time in the company as a regular employee. So this has multiple, ramifications, which I will come back to a little later. But at least government is recognizing that there is a disconnect. Now government is very, very insistent that all of the academic institutions, they start their entrepreneurship program, and understood the obvious bureaucratic hassles that were there. They are on record saying that, remove those bureaucratic hassles. And I'm very proud. And, just to rub it on, Raghu, we are the first IIT to come up with our own student entrepreneurship policy that has been ratified by the Senate. And, many other things we are doing, the students have themselves proposed that let us do a summer entrepreneurship program, meaning just like a summer internship program, which Suchindra very rightly said that it is a glorified photocopying job. They have said that they will do experiments exactly like Madan suggested, that you give us very small amount of money, let us go out and make some money out of it and come back. So that is something that is being now done. So when you have that, when you have a student entrepreneurship program, when you have a functioning incubator, I would like to believe that in next 5 years, you will see what is our undergraduates, that is the most sought after academic programs in the country today. Maybe at max 2 to 3 undergraduates will typically take up entrepreneurship in a year out of 950. I want to believe that in 5 years, you will see that number growing to 40 to 50 per year. And I would be personally very, very happy if that happens. Okay. I will come to the National Startup Advisory Council later, because I don't want to rob everybody else's time.
No, I think that's very interesting perspectives, Amitabh. The one question that comes to my mind, which I would like to get your point of view, that when we see the examples of successful models, while it's great and very heartening to see that the institutions of reputation and high performance in India are really leading the pack, I sometimes feel that the people who really need the innovation the most, the entrepreneurship the most, the point that Madan raised, are people who are living in the tier B and tier C and the towns and the villages. And that is like 90% of the hinterland of the country. And the colleges also probably have the same challenges, because they are not in the industrial clusters like the Israel example Suchindra was saying. For example, they don't have access to the ideas and the experts. Funding may not really that be big an issue, as Madan showed, because there are enough ROI available to go from X to 3X at a very marginal cost there. how do you think the universities and even the small businesses in the smaller towns should really be addressing this problem? Because it is not a Delhi, Bangalore, Calcutta problem. It is a problem that has to be seen from the eyes of cities that have 5 lakh and 10 lakh and 20 lakh population. What would be your thought process on that?
Well, the solution is actually fairly straightforward, but impossible to achieve. That is, you need to simply ask that why the IITs are able to do it and others are not. Without naming names, as someone associated with the incubation ecosystem for last 8 years, I have approached almost every national laboratories, that comes under the scientific ministries, that, you have such fantastic technologies, why don't you commercialize it? And people are mortally afraid that what if we do, we might get into legal trouble. Now, why the IITs can do it then? Because we are governed by a board of governors. And a process that is ratified by the board of governors, if I follow that, I will not be touched by the law. So therefore, I can have the courage to do things as long as my board has given me the authority that you can do this. This, again, I will not name, a very, very famous medical college. There I learned that none of the doctors want to file patent in the name of the university, which is the right thing to do. University has the right to own those patents. It is not that the doctors want to cheat the university. Why do not they want to do it? Because the process of commercialization of the patent is not rule-driven. It is who is the registrar and the deputy registrar and assistant registrar and vice chancellor on the given day will dictate. That will take 3 years. In the meantime, some officials will change. It will take another 1.5 years. So that's where the problem is. So until and unless the universities are given that confidence that you can act based on rules framed by your governing authority and just go ahead and do it, I don't think it is going to happen. But that is, in my opinion, I would love to hear from Raghu as well. In my opinion, that is the fundamental difference between an IIT and other institutions. Because of the 104 companies that IIT Kanpur has today, only 35 are from IIT ecosystem. The remaining 70 are from the same tier 2-3 towns that you were talking about. They came out of those colleges whose names you do not know, and they're doing fantastic business, tech-driven business.
Yeah, no, I think that's in fact, I'm tempted to actually jump over to Suchindra, because I remember he had a point of view on really saying how can individual universities think of their own vision and charter. Would you like to share any thoughts on this, Suchindra?
Yes, and I think, I fully subscribe to what Dr. Amitabha said, ensuring that you are enabling your faculty. In fact, if you look at this entire system, you have students who are eager to do a lot of things, who are willing to try out things. The industry who is having a lot of problems, who are having a lot of challenges, are looking for solutions. The most important connect between these two is the faculty. How do you enable your faculty? And it has to be done in multiple ways. Professor Amitabha spoke about the fact that you need to have very clearly defined processes, right? We worked with a couple of universities, and you'll be interested. A lot of people, filing an IP is a time-drawn, long process, right? The best thing is a lot of universities actually have a law department within themselves. The two departments don't talk to each other, right? What is stopping a university, for example, to just take help from their law department and use them to file and process this entire IP? What we did as consultants was nothing extraordinary, trust me. There were some very basic, sensible things that you need to do. Things around, if you give enough workload to faculty and he has no time to go and speak to the industry, what will he do? IITs have done very well. My alma mater, I am Bangalore. In their policy very clearly states out that a faculty could do up to 52 days of consulting work, right? It gives them ample leeway to do work when they want to. They can plan their academic year around it, right? If you don't give teachers the time to do it, it will not work. International universities, we keep talking about international universities. IITs have done well. In fact, a lot of private universities nowadays have done well, where they've created a very clear monetary split as well. 66% after all the expenses go to the university, 33% or whatever that amount is. It could be 60, 30, 20, 80, whatever. That's immaterial. But the fact is, that's a very clear definition of what will happen, how it will happen. And so there's no difficulty there. In fact, we've done, a lot of universities have done even better things. Dr. Amitabha spoke about internships, right? In a lot of cases where, how do you really get your faculty up to the mark to do this, right? And this is again nothing new, we just ran a process of faculty internships. So those 2 months, even the faculty is not doing a lot of things, right? Unless you don't understand what's happening in the real world, how do you tell your students around it? How do you prepare them around it? So we started running faculty internships in some of the universities where said the faculty will go out, the placement cell actually will get the faculty internship, because in a lot of cases, faculty were very unclear how to go around it, right? By the second year or the third year of this rollout, the faculty were having more internship offers than the students would ever have, right? But the fact is, the faculty goes to the industry, works on their floor for 2 months. They understand really, okay, I can teach you about mechanics and fluid mechanics and everything. What is really happening on the floor? Now they come back, their classes are much more interesting for the students, and the students get to know what's really happening. So faculty can really enable this entire process of industry academic interface. They are the real guys. So both sides are ready.
Sure.
And there's a very distinct need. But I think this is the missing link which we need to enable in a big way.
No, I think these are very impactful perspectives, and I'm actually tempted to now shift to the second gear and really try to get into, because the way I see that is that there are obviously opportunities for us to get better in each of the tracks. My question to all of us, the second question I want to really pose is that is what we are doing in silos really enough? For example, the academia is solving the problems in a specific silo, and probably industry is trying to solve it in a silo. And probably they are not really coordinated, or they are not really orchestrated among them. I want to call out one very interesting paper that I was reading, which came in the Sloan Management Review in 2010, which actually talked about the best practices for industry-university collaboration. Even though the article is a little dated, but I think there was a very interesting concept that the authors talk about. They call it as the outcome impact gap. And what they did was they actually saw over a period of multiple years, more than 100 such collaborations between industry and universities. And they found that roughly 50% of the examined projects were resulting in what they were seen as major outcomes. That is, some new ideas or solutions to the problems came about, or developed a new method of solving, and so on. Now, given the risk and research funding, that's a very impressive batting average. That was the point of view of the authors, because 50% hit rate looks bad, but when you think of the whole innovation game, that's a very good batting average. So that was really nice, but that was the good news. But there was a bad news hidden in the good news. And the bad news was that only 40% of the projects with major research outcomes were actually exploited in the ways that led to a major impact defined as an observable and generally agreed upon positive impact on a company's competitiveness or productivity. The other 60% of the projects simply languished. They underachieved, at least from a business standpoint. So the outcomes did not really make their way into the products or processes or influence company decisions. So the point I want to really drive for us in the next half an hour or so is, well, while these are some of the very important things, how can we really create a synergy between them? How can we really make sure that we are working together and not once again solving the problems in silo? Because I fear that solving the problems in silo can once again lead to a new normal where both of us will have a new set of problems which are not again talking to each other. So I want to again come back to you, Raghu, and really get your point of view. And also if you can weigh in a little more on the industry expectations, because we talked a lot about the academia perspective, but I would like to also make sure sure that we are seeing the other side of the coin, which is really what industry should be doing and how do we achieve the synergy. So if you would like to share some thoughts on that, Raghu.
Sure, TV. First, I want to tell you, for everything I heard, I have a couple of rejoinders I want to make, but unfortunately, you have given me a different question. So,
no, please go ahead and share on that as well. I think it will add to the conversation.
Maybe I'll answer this question and maybe quickly give some thoughts on the other thing. See, I am very optimistic. Let me say the first thing, right? I think very often, and this is an Indian malaise, I think we look at results very quickly. Now you look at a country like US and then say, industry and university has been working together. They've been working together so well for so many years, right? Look at the number of university-based research parks that are there. In India, you have one or two, you can count in your fingers, real university-based research parks, right? And this is something, as Amitabha also said, this is something that we have been doing 8-10 years. And we were resource crunched before. Now resources are in. So I really see that this is just the beginning. And I think this notion of silos, also, and let me be honest, the silos are because I think, though there were a few universities where industry was doing work, but if you wanted real technology, you would look outside India to get the technology. To have the confidence that the universities in India and the faculty in India can be delivering technology that's world beating is something that's not happened before. It's happening now. It slowly will happen. And that takes a lot of work from both sides to do. So there is a risk reward in everything. So you have to go internally, you have to cultivate the faculty, you have to repose faith on these people and then say, well, let's work together. And I think this notion of research parks and so on are the first step in that. And I actually believe that if that faith is placed on people and then you start working together, I think you can do wonders. And I start to see that happening, and I think it will be accelerated. I would expect for a country of the size of India, so the research park that we have at IIT Madras, I would really like to see about 500 colleges having research parks like that all over India. What we have is just too little to see real impact. In fact, when Madan talks about the mass entrepreneur idea, I think our universities are not yet geared to be at that level because we are just starting now. And I think as we go forward, that will happen. If you ask me what the industry should do, I say the industry should say, let's really partner and then repose faith that we can do this internally. And then also have the ability to wait for a while when this grows. So a little bit of patience is also very, very important. So that's the main thing I would think from what industry should do, I would say. Since I told you that I just want to make sure to Darshan, when I said this is a lived experience, I'm not saying it should not run courses. In fact, at IIT Madras, we are doing an MS in entrepreneurship. So what I'm trying to say is it's not a traditional program, and that's what he's also saying. Again, you have that lived experience in the program that allows you to learn. Okay, that's one. The other interesting thing I would actually ask, sorry, I don't want to become a moderator, but when I listen to Madan, one of the questions that is going to come up is many of the businesses that we talk about, mass entrepreneurship, right? So there's going to be a large impact on technology, for example, right? Small businesses are being driven out by Amazon and so on. See, technology is a double-edged sword. One is it's going to consolidate and run the mom and pop stores, which we talked about as mass entrepreneurship. There are multiple such things out of business. At the same time, the technology is an enabler. It democratizes, and then it allows the small people to do big things, right? So there is a two-way street. So it's going to be a very interesting thing that's going to happen with this. So how is this going to pan out is something that I'm not able to visualize. And it's a very, very complicated, dynamical system. And I would really love to see what will happen 20 years down the line. Would we have many of these driven out and these conglomerates somehow operating, or what's going to happen? So that's an interesting thing to think about also. And I assume country like India and this problem being complex, there is not one view. If you actually think about it, one last point before I stop. You think about a country like US and then say, how are they at the top of the pyramid, right? many of the things that we think about are, local businesses and so on, more consumer businesses. That has to be driven by economy, right? So you have to have these really top-notch technologies where you are absolutely dominating if you want the overall country to be prosperous, right? So I really think it's important to understand that unless you have these technologies, you're not going to have the wealth to have a trickle-down effect. So somehow this balance has to be maintained. It's another thing that I just like to mention. So with this, I have a lot more TV, but I'll stop and...
Oh, thanks, Raghu. I think great. So I would like to actually go to Madan since you tagged him on your response. Madan, would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I think that's the moot question itself. But I just want to. I am super optimistic to start with. If you just look at it, Tathagat and Raghu, especially on the technology side, right? There isn't a village I have visited where I have not found a mobile repair guy. Nobody has taught them. There's no certification. They've figured it out themselves, right? And one dingy board saying mobile repair and a set of services around with it, right? I think we're still coming to terms of the possibilities of job creation and entrepreneurial opportunities by just one smartphone and the data that comes along with it. Now, we are at the cusp of a massive technology revolution, IoT, drones, AI, ML playing a role in agri-tech, healthcare, education, right? If you take VR, AR and the possibilities that go along with it. I think if we can start to unpack these technologies from the lens of how can it improve the economy, how can it improve jobs and earning potential, and how can it really spur an entrepreneurship movement, I think the sky is the limit. But we have to make conscious choices. Many times I feel that, a lot of us caught on to the smartphone revolution after it had got started, right? I think if we can then start saying, how will 3D printing revolutionize after-sales service? Of course, on one hand, there'll be job losses that can happen centrally, but I think if we plan it and approach it well enough, the distributed economy that will start coming up will far outweigh the centralized part. So the other theme that I would want to present, therefore, at a larger choice of technology and economic growth is how do you create more distributed models? I love what the founder of Seva, one of the most thoughtful leaders that we have in the country, Elaben Bhatt, she's written a lovely book called Anubandh, where she talks about 100-mile communities. How can you create sustained economic activity around education, health, financial inclusion, banking, construction, education, all within a 100-mile radius? And can you then not even decentralize, but can you create a distributed model? And I think several of these technologies have a phenomenal way of distributing the economic activities itself. So if we can bring that together in a very conscious way, I think we can really unleash that economic growth at every TESOL block level.
No, I think the whole idea of really building the clusters, and I would call it as a fractal pattern of innovation probably, because that can really scale up. Nothing scales better probably than a fractal or a culture. The challenge that I also see is that, as Raghu also talked about, and I think we have been resource deprived in the past, the challenge that we still have is that a lot of movement of atoms and molecules does require a lot of dollars. And we don't always have it. Whereas digital, as you said, like every village has a mobile repair guy. How can the digital technology really enable us to kind of leapfrog and totally skip the atoms and molecules and really go to the bits and bytes? Is that really a possibility that we are seeing some kind of a digital backbone that can actually bring digital villages, the digital 100-mile radius kind of a concept, if you will?
Exactly. So technology is no longer a vertical, right? When we were all growing up in colleges, it was one of the choices that you had to make to say, I am in the technology industry, right? I started out my career in the early days of Wipro and Infosys. Today, technology is horizontal. It penetrates every aspect of our existence today, right? So I think, especially from an entrepreneurial mindset as well, if we can start exposing youngsters to the possibilities that exist in the world out there, right? As this famous ice hockey player said, and this is a far abused quote, but I'll say it nevertheless, saying that, don't skate to where the puck was, skate to where the puck will be. I think if we together as an ecosystem can figure out where will this be, and to your point, see, India will rise if Bharat rises, right? Otherwise, we'll be staying in these cocoons and islands of excellence, right? So we need to make sure that every district, every taluk becomes like fireflies rising together. And that, of course, technology plays a role, but I'll go back to your the question that you asked. See, we are, and this whole concept of entrepreneurship, youth engagement is a complex adaptive system. No one player can impact the outcomes on their own, right? And unfortunately, given the state of the system that we are in, I see too many fragmented efforts. You know, somebody has done something fantastic in Kerala, but somebody else is replicating and trying to learn the same lesson in Bengal. There's something terrific happening in Kanpur, but somebody else is trying to do the same thing in Lucknow, right? So what is required is really the ecosystem to collaborate, come together, learn, collaborate, and act together. Otherwise, we're wasting a lot of resources. I mean, I get very, disillusioned or disheartened when I see somebody else saying, "Oh, we spent 3 years trying to learn this," and I said, dudes, those things was learned 5 years ago by this guy. All you could have done is gone, reach out to him and asked him what you're learning and build on that. So I think conversations like this will really help bring the ecosystem together so that we are acting in unison and in some kind of a synchronized fashion, so that we can orchestrate this. Otherwise, somebody beautifully said it, India is a land of failed or success, is a graveyard of successful pilots. And unfortunately, we'll remain that way. There'll be islands of excellence, but there'll be islands. And we will not have a way to bring it together.
Great. No, I think that's a very good point of view. And I actually want to have a segue to Darshan and really ask about one of the points. So in fact, I was reading an article in the World Economic Forum in 2018, and the article was all about calling out the universities to nurture their own, like how can they basically improve the collaboration? And they gave a prescription on 3 points. One of them was nurturing their own talent pipelines. The second was industry should tap into social sciences, and the university tech transfer offices must prioritize flexibility. Now, when we look at a lot of the discussions that we had, we've been talking about the meta framework of problem solving, the skilling part of it. The one thing I want to really, and you've been in, we have talked to a lot of entrepreneurs. The one thing I want to really understand and pick your brains is really on the whole ignored or under-leveraged part of social sciences in India. I mean, I went to computer science school, and for 2 years, I did not study anything on anthropology or sociology, or because human sciences are somewhat considered in a different way in our educational system there. And yet, after all these years, I think this is the most important thing for me to design computer systems than even understanding how does a compiler or an operating system work really. What is your thinking on this, Darshan, in terms of when you look at the future entrepreneurs or when you have spoken to the entrepreneurs? How is their own social compass really, and what is the role of social sciences in that process?
Fantastic question. I think, so I'm going to try to answer this with a few examples as well. First part is entrepreneurship is not a discipline, right? It actually is multidisciplinary in itself, because you have different domains that you need to do. So functional, marketing, finance, accounts, sales. On the other hand, you also have technology, and so that is not just IT, information technology, but even say mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, and in this discussion, we've talked a lot about product side of entrepreneurship. The other side of entrepreneurship is sales, right? You have product and you have sales, and then you have the admin or finance bit that goes around it. So if you think about the problems that we have in India, right? What are the large problems, social problems that we have? We have problems around different culture, different economy, like different income levels, different languages, different behaviors. We are multiple countries within one country. So, I mean, if you go 200 kilometers from your current location, there's a new language, there's a new food item. And so that also means, I keep saying, India is the land of opportunity. US is the land of plenty. India is the land of opportunity because you have such big, large problems to be solved. So where does these different disciplines kind of come into picture? when you are starting a business, I really like what Dr. Saras Saraswati says. Now, Dr. Saras Saraswati has coined the term and this logic, which is called effectuation. And what effectuation essentially means is, what do you have? Who do you know? What do you know? And what's important to you? Why do you want to solve this problem? Right? And that is where all of these disciplines or our own points of view, cultures come into being. I grew up in Pune. I ran a fertilizer business in Solapur, and I understood, how agriculture farmers right from Simla to Kerala, how did they operate? What were their challenges? And suddenly you found, well, yield is not there. Well, why is the yield not there? Because our, Israel, Amsterdam, Netherlands, all of them have already done it, right? We could have learned from them 20 years ago, but we are still not there. Well, why are we not there? Because we have some very local human problems, social problems. And so you need to approach at it that way. If you try to take what has worked in US, in Israel, in Europe, and try to put it in India, it's likely not going to work. It has to come from the ground up, right? You have to come from the point of view saying, well, I know how these people are. I know how we function. I know how to do business in India. And therefore, with this new advent of, technology, Geo, Paytm with 350 million users, I can, and, the fintech startups like Capital Float, Early Salary, how can I now bring these different things together to create a solution to the problem, rather than I have a solution and this is worked in Israel, so now let me put it in India, right? And in Israel, the average acreage is 150 acres. In India, we have 1.5 acres. How is that going to make, And just also on this point, what Madan said is, well, India is, we are at $2,100 GDP per capita, and we are growing. We are entering the phase where between $2,000 to $3,000 in GDP per capita is where the domestic consumption goes up. People have enough money to spend money. And that is what is changing, right? And so if that is happening, then as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, I have something. There is money in the pocket, or there is water in the well. If there is no water in the well, what are you trying to take out, right? US is in a different stratosphere. Israel is in a different stratosphere. So I don't know if I answered this exactly, but what I wanted to really emphasize on is we are a country with very diverse, with our own problems. And you cannot come in with solutions that have worked in different geographies with different technologies to try and mix it over here. It has to be ground up. And so if it is ground up, which means you are either by experience or by research or by education, you're going to do this. So as an education institute, what is it that we could do? We could do things like, can we take undergrad students who come from, say, metro background, right? To take them to small villages, take them to Desh Deshpande Foundation at Hubli, and really understand the real problems that are there and come up with a solution to the problem and not the other way around. So I'm going to stop over there. But
yeah. No, I think that the last point you mentioned was very similar to and a great extension into what Amitabha had said earlier in terms of that probably we are sitting inside an ivory tower. And sometimes sitting in Bangalore, I get the same feeling when I am talking to the entrepreneurs. And many of us techies are guilty of a very inside out perspective that, hey, this is technology. I know I can code in blockchain and cloud and I'll build something. And I call it as the solution in search of a problem syndrome, that I've built something, but I don't know what problem it's going to solve. So I think some great perspective there. On the same question, Amitabh, I wanted to get your thought process. You coming from a biology/medical field, what is your point of view on really looking at the social sciences? Because many times we consider the hard sciences as a different thing from social sciences. How critical do you think is this synergy between the understanding of these basic sciences?
Well, I look at it from a very different perspective, and that is not as an like a professor in charge of innovation and incubation. That is because I have done PhD and I have been doing research for such a long time, and not in molecular biology or electronics engineering or something like that. Because what scientific training does to you is you gain the ability to think logically. It does not matter what discipline has been taught to you. There you earn depth of understanding of a particular discipline, knowledge. But the analytical mind can be shaped no matter what you are doing. And that perspective, if you can bring in industry academia relationship, that actually can work. I will give you two arguments, and we have been discussing about it yesterday. Have you ever heard anywhere in the world that two people started a business in collaboration where they do not even know each other? That does not work. So when we are talking about industry academia collaboration and joint ventures or whatever, the fact remains that 95% of us, we have no clue what the industry wants. And the industry does not know what we are capable of delivering. We have preconceived notion that industry research is very ordinary. They do the same old, same old. Industry thinks that, academic people, they are only after our money and nothing else. So I thought that it will be a good idea to break the barriers. And we started two programs. One, we call it Tech Talk. In a Tech Talk, we call an industry leader and we tell him specifically, point blank, that you, for 30 minutes, you will talk about the issues that are being faced by your company that you are seeking solution for in technical terms. And these talks are now very popular at IIT Kanpur, and many collaborations have started since. Many collaborations have started. And we have also done the reverse. IIT Madras has been doing it for a very long time, is that we send our undergraduate students who normally they all go for summer training in their third year. We select a group of 10 and send them to hospitals. Yeah? So medical devices is something that I am more familiar with. And the King George's Medical College Hospital in Lucknow has accommodated them. They let them stay in their own guest house for 2 weeks. And they are given access to every functional organ of the hospital. That includes operation theater, outpatient, registry, nursing station, everything. And if you think of a hospital, other than the doctors and the patients, everything else that is in there is an engineering implement. So the doctors know which implement they want, but they cannot make it. Some of my colleagues, not me, they can certainly make things, but they have no clue what to make. So we are trying to bridge this gap. And I will give you two examples. The first one, COVID time, all of you know that oxygen was needed, right? Now, dry oxygen cannot be delivered to the patient. The oxygen has to be delivered through a cup, where the oxygen comes in. In the cup, there is water, and then the oxygen goes out. It gathers moisture from that water in the cup. Now, that moisture is not efficiently taken up if the water is not heated up a little bit. So you have a very low power heating plate at the bottom. This device, believe me, even in a government college like Jhansi Medical Center, is purchased from an imported source for 70,000 rupees a cup, which when I took it to my mechanical engineering colleague, he could immediately make it for 3,000 rupees without compromising quality. What is in there? Just a heating plate and a plastic cup. So, but my colleague never knew that this is a problem that existed. Another example, like many of us, at least I am for sure, I used to think that when doctors do surgery, like they must be coming out with some big, knife and they do this. In reality, that turns out not to be the case. What they do is they take a very thin electrical wire that is heated by electricity and they cut the tissues with that. It's called a cautery. Now, when you cut it, because it is burning through human flesh, carbon is deposited on it and it stops working. So you need a real-time cleaning mechanism, and a third-year undergraduate student created that solution for them in only 3 months after he visited the hospital. But before that, none of us knew that the problem exists. So what is needed very much is that we get to know each other. And for that, avenues have to be created. Every institution should do their own experiment based on their own logical thinking. And as Madan was talking about, instead of, I think Suchindra was talking about, instead of everybody rediscovering the wheel, there should be a mechanism for exchanging the good practices, and we should collectively practice all the good things and as Raghu appropriately said, that it is such a huge country that if any one of us think that if I share my SOP with someone else, then my market share will go down. It's just not going to happen. So rather, the mechanism has to be created where we exchange, and it is a fact that despite all the IITs being sister institutions, very little diffusion mechanism exists today. Those things also need to be created. We need to also create, there are fantastic scholars in the university ecosystem. We are completely detached from them. So that also needs to be created. And there is only so many hours in a day for me. Therefore, that internal distribution of load also has to be done in a very appropriate manner so that we can think of creating an ecosystem which is, as Suchindra said, inquisitive, solution-oriented. And I am not saying that we should not be doing basic science research. I am myself a basic science researcher. That has its own place. Like, if only 10% of us think about collaborating with industry, making industry-relevant products, we will be in a completely different plane in 10 years' time.
Oh, great. Thanks, Amitabh. I think those are some very, very relevant point of views. I think as a country, as we are marching forward and as we are getting more and more prosperous, I think those opportunities should be looked into, because we cannot create it as like an ivory tower and just keep it to one section of the society. You rightly talked about the whole idea of diffusion of innovation, even within ourselves, and make sure that we don't end up reinventing the wheel. It is not about reinventing the wheel that was invented somewhere else. Even within our country, we have a huge opportunity to collaborate. So we are almost at the hour now. So I just want to take a quick round with all of you panelists. And like, if you want to just call out 2 or 3 of the top things on your mind in 30 seconds or 40 seconds, just so that we can kind of wrap up and have your point of view, that would be excellent. So Suchindra, would you like to go first and kind of share what's your top on the mind when it comes to industry, academia, collaboration, and improving the entrepreneurship?
For me, there's just 2 major areas that require a lot of improvement. One is enabling the ecosystem through some very basic logical steps, and the second is knowledge asymmetry that Professor Raghu and Professor Amitabha spoke about. I'll just take a moment to introduce Wizenoze, the current edtech enterprise that I work with. I always told other universities about academic interfaces with industry, right? Wizenoze is a prime example. Out of the two founders, one of our founders is actually a faculty member at the University of Twente. He developed an excellent technology. Microsoft, the other founder is the ex-director of Microsoft in Netherlands. She met the professor at one of the industry events at the university. They worked well together. And today we have an enterprise which is actually touching 3 million student lives today, right? And I can't give you a better example. I'm living that right now, and I see that technology being in use excellently for a country like India, for that any country. So it's about getting these two together, breaking that barrier, and removing that information itself. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Suchindra. Darshan, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I think the way I see this is it rests like a triangle. First part is the industry, the corporates should give very defined, short 10-week to 20-week problem statements, right? On the other hand, you have students who get this opportunity and interest-based are able to opt in, right? To keep them accountable and to maintain the discipline, you need faculty members who keep them accountable. Now, this might seem very simple, but from an execution standpoint, even a 10-week period becomes extremely long. Some of the Western universities have been able to do this really, really well. So I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel. What we need to do is keep it paid basis. You want students to work on it. Don't do internships which are free. Pay a stipend, right? Give some incentive to keep the faculty, engaged. The university may not need to earn because they might be earning through the fees from the student. So, like they say in the investment world, you align the incentives, everything else falls in place. So keep the money flowing properly and keep this in short bursts. So I guess I'll stop at that.
Sure. Thanks, Darshan. Amitabh, would you like to summarize your thoughts on this?
Yeah, without getting into detail, I would say that we're too late to get started. And I am confident that there is willingness on part of the academia. And it is an open invitation to the industry that just first make friends with us, then the rest will automatically follow.
I think that's a wonderful gesture. Madan, what's your thought?
I think there's unlimited potential that our young people have. And many times we from the various ecosystem actors underestimate their potential and don't give them space. So maybe the thought in my mind is, how can we put them at the center of our universe? And everything that we do as industry, as academia, as government, as supporters, whatever, what can we do to support their journey as entrepreneurs, as change makers, and as problem solvers? I think if we can take that perspective, then we will automatically work together. I think a lot of us, are comfortable in our own fiefdoms, but the focus is on the student, on the youth. And interestingly, we are also around the International Youth Day. And it's only appropriate that we recognize that we are here to serve the youth who are 100% of our future. And it's all of our roles to make sure that we don't put any barriers in unleashing their full potential.
No, I think that's a great thought. It reminds me that, hey, these youth are your future. Better take care of them because you'll be old soon, that kind of a thing. So I think we need to do that. Raghu, can I invite you to share your thoughts and summarize from your point of view?
Sure. So, as I said before, I think we are still, though we are getting prosperous, we are still resource constrained. So I think we should not lose any amount of resources. I think the idea of diffusion and so on all speaks to very rapidly sharing and going forward. So that's one thought. I'm going to also give you another completely orthogonal thought, which is we talk about universities doing work with industry, but you think about many of the things that we are taking advantage of, we are taking the tail end of the innovation. So mobile is not our innovation, right? Many of the things we are, once it's all done, we are actually catching the wrong end of the stick in some of these. Though it's wonderful now, I'm no doubt about all of this. So I really think as a country, we should aspire to get technology that's at the other end of the funnel, where you are the originator of that. That I think has to happen if India has to move forward. And universities are a wonderful place. And I think what Amitabha said is wonderful. I think 10% of us at least should aspire for that. It's not that everyone should work with industry. 10% of us should say, look, I don't worry about anything. This next greatest and the best thing, which looks totally impossible now, I want to work on it. I think we should have the confidence to work on that. That's another thought I think we should really think about.
Sure. Amitabh, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just wanted to add to what Raghu said. I absolutely agree that we are mostly using texts that have been discovered elsewhere. But we have a very niche role to play somewhere else, and the whole world will follow us there. That is, we develop things for the resource constrained setting, which are outstanding quality without compromising on the quality. It is not just the rest of Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa that will take it. Even the so-called developed countries will have to take it because sustainability is at stake.
Great.
We should aspire to that.
No, absolutely. I think that's a very, very great parting thought from all of us in terms of really that we have to develop our own market. We have to really catch the tiger, not by the proverbial tail, but probably put the hand in the mouth and really say, okay, let's go and innovate the world. So this is, I think, a great idea with which to wrap up. The key points that struck with me, and I just want to talk about a few of them, is we heard about the whole idea of inculcating the mindset of inquiry. And I think it's important to really make sure, and some of the experiments that we heard, for example, in Delhi, where the school children are being exposed to think about it and even given real money for them to come back and do something. I think it's a very phenomenal experiment there. The whole idea of go out in the real world and discover the problems is, I think, a great part of it. While serendipity does play a role in terms of discovering what might be interesting problems or the friction, we should not lose sight of the fact that we are living in a resource constrained environment, especially in our country. And as I like to see it, right from the moment you are out of your home, you have enough opportunities. The good thing is that we all can make so much of difference in our daily lives. We don't have to really solve the most problems that look very romantic. But as we heard from the Tumkur experiment, for example, that there is enough and more that we all can do by just making the impact, even at a local entrepreneurship level. It does not have to sound like a rocket science, but it is something which could be a day-to-day activity that could be done. We talked about the importance of lived experiences versus a classroom experiences. And I think there is a place for both of them. While there is an importance of lived experiences in terms of really discovering the problems and how can we solve them better, there is also an equal importance in terms of really understanding the mechanics of what does it take as entrepreneurship as a systematic subject, and make sure, as Darshan talked about, in the context of that being a discipline by itself and an execution muscle, and not simply something that can be either a personality trait or it can be left to the charisma of an individual, but something that can be taught because of the mechanics of that. And we heard about the whole idea of processes as an important part of it to enable the collaboration, because we cannot always leave it to chance in terms of really saying there. So I think these are some of the things that I talked about. And the most important thing that I want to take away from this is that we are a country of unlimited potential. We have the demographic dividend on our side. The good news is that there is an eagerness from every partner, every stakeholder. As Amitabh very rightly said, you don't do the business with strangers. You really have to do the business among friends. So I think the first important thing that I would say is really the clarion call from this panel, which is like, let's go out and really make friends across the table and really make sure that we have the most conducive environment for us to enable the conversation, bring out the dialogue, and then everything else will probably follow there, because when the hearts are clean and the intentions are aligned, the magic can happen. With that, I would like to thank all of you esteemed panelists for a great conversation. I totally enjoyed the conversation, and I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of Walmart and the Converge at Walmart event for so graciously giving away your time and sharing the insights with all of us. Thank you once again, and it's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you, Tathagat.
Thank you.
Same here.
It was lovely.
That too. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.